He hadn't seen her in almost 8 years. Yet the moment Daniel's eyes brushed over the young Latino woman standing at the checkout line, 2 small children clinging to her legs, his breath locked in his chest as if someone had plunged a fist straight into it. He recognized the curve of her jaw before he recognized her face, the way she tucked a loose strand of dark hair behind her ear when she felt watched, the hesitant lift of her chin as if forcing herself to appear stronger than she felt. Lucia. The name slammed into him like an old memory refusing to stay buried. But what he did next wasn't just instinct, it was something he himself couldn't explain. He found himself drifting closer, his rational mind screaming that he should turn around, pretend he hadn't seen her, disappear into the anonymous safety of the grocery aisles. Yet his feet kept moving. The store felt suddenly too bright, too loud, as if the buzzing lights were illuminating every mistake he had ever made. The little boy beside her, no older than 6, was tugging nervously at the hem of her jacket, asking in a small whisper if they really had enough money this time. The girl, perhaps 4, hugged a stuffed rabbit whose ear was nearly torn off, and Lucia, with that quiet, stoic sadness she had always carried like an invisible shadow, answered in English that trembled around the edges, "We'll make it work, mi amor. We always make it work." Daniel stopped just a few feet behind them, torn between shame and an inexplicable pull. He remembered her as fierce, stubborn, radiant even in the chaos of their past. But the woman in front of him looked exhausted, her shoulders weighed down by years he had not witnessed. What stunned him most wasn't the fact that she had children, though they twisted something painful inside him, but the realization that she was here, in the same town he had spent years trying to rebuild himself in, as if their paths had never truly diverged. The cashier announced the total, and Lucia froze. She scanned the few items, rice, milk, cereal, a pack of diapers, with a desperation she tried to mask. But Daniel saw it. He saw everything. When she reached into her purse and pulled out a handful of crumpled bills, he felt his stomach turn. It wasn't enough. The embarrassment in her eyes, the fear of judgment from strangers, it was the same expression he had once promised himself he'd never let her wear again. Before he could stop himself, he stepped forward and said quietly, "I've got it. Please, let me pay." His voice sounded foreign in his own ears, too soft, too intimate, too full of something he had spent years denying. Lucia jerked her head toward him, her eyes widening with a mixture of shock and something sharper, anger perhaps, betrayal. The children looked between them, sensing a tension they didn't understand. Lucia whispered harshly, "Daniel, why are you here?" And before he could answer, before he could explain why he had done something so impulsive, the little girl tugged on Lucia's sleeve and asked if the man was a friend. Lucia didn't respond. Her gaze stayed locked on him, cold and wounded. "Don't do this," she said under her breath. "Not now. Not in front of them." But it was too late. The cashier was waiting, the people behind them were watching, and Daniel realized he had just stepped into a moment that would change everything again. When Lucia grabbed the children's hands and muttered that they needed to leave immediately, Daniel felt panic surge through him. He reached out gently, not touching her, but close enough for her to feel the pull of his desperation. "Lucia, wait. Please, let me explain." She stiffened, her jaw tightening, her eyes glistening with a storm he had not been prepared to face. And then she said the words that shattered the ground beneath him. "Does he know you're his father?" Daniel felt the world tilt, as if the floor of the grocery store had dropped out from under him. The noise around them blurred into a distant roar, the beeping scanners, the murmurs of impatient shoppers, the rustle of plastic bags, all swallowed by the single question that echoed in his skull with brutal clarity. His father? The words hit him so hard he nearly forgot to breathe. Lucia stood there trembling, her children pressed against her sides, refusing to meet his eyes again, as if something inside her might collapse if she held his gaze for too long. He tried to speak, but his throat locked. The little boy, unaware of the storm building between the adults, stared up at him with wide, dark eyes that suddenly looked familiar in a way that made Daniel's heart squeeze painfully. The shape of the eyebrows, the softness of the gaze, a resemblance he had never let himself imagine. He felt a sting behind his ribs, a silent accusation he could not defend himself against. Lucia pulled the boy closer, her voice barely above a whisper as she ushered them toward the exit. "Vamos, mi amores. We have to go." The automatic doors opened, letting in a gust of cold air that whipped through her hair, making her look even smaller, even more fragile than he remembered. Daniel followed her outside, not out of pride, but out of pure desperation, because everything he thought he knew about his past had just been rewritten by a single sentence. He called her name again, softer this time, as if afraid of speaking too loudly might shatter whatever thin thread still connected them. But Lucia didn't slow down. She was walking fast, almost running, the children struggling to keep up as she hurried across the parking lot. The sky was overcast, heavy with the threat of rain, and it seemed to mirror the suffocating weight in his chest. He finally caught up to her near a faded blue sedan that looked like it had lived 10 lives too many. Lucia fumbled with the car keys, her hands shaking, her breath uneven. He said her name again, barely more than a plea. "Lucia, is the boy—" He couldn't finish the question, the rest trapped behind fear he dared not articulate. She stopped, not because she wanted to, but because her body betrayed the exhaustion she had been hiding under layers of pride. Slowly she lifted her face to him. Her eyes were red, but her voice was sharp enough to cut through him. "You don't get to ask me that now." She swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "Not after disappearing, not after choosing your life over ours." Daniel felt the accusation like a punch, but also confusion twisting deep inside. "Lucia, I didn't choose," he began, but she raised a trembling hand, silencing him with a gesture full of bitterness. "You left," she said, the words trembling with swallowed hurt. "You walked away without even knowing what you were walking away from." Her voice cracked. She pressed her lips together as if fighting to regain control. The little girl leaned against her leg, whispering, "Mommy, we're cold." That simple phrase stabbed through the tense moment, grounding it in the quiet reality of their struggle. Daniel's chest tightened. He looked at the children again, and the truth he feared became even harder to ignore. Lucia wiped her cheek quickly, pretending she hadn't cried. "Please," she said, her voice small for the first time, "just let us go. I can't do this here. I can't do this now." But Daniel stepped closer, emotion tightening his voice. "I didn't know, Lucia. If there's even a chance he's mine, you have to tell me. Please, tell me the truth." Her breath hitched. She looked at him with a mixture of fury and heartbreak, and he could almost see the memories clawing their way up inside her, the nights they'd dreamed together, the promises they'd whispered in the dark, the cruel reasons that pulled them apart before either of them was ready. Finally, she exhaled shakily. "You think you deserve the truth, after everything?" She shook her head slowly, as if trying to protect herself from her emotions. "If you really want to know, meet me tomorrow, noon, at the old Riverside Park." She paused, her voice breaking on the next words. "Come alone. I'll tell you everything." Before he could respond, she ushered the children into the car, slammed the door, and drove off, leaving Daniel standing in the biting wind, his heart thundering with a fear he had never known. But as he watched her car disappear into the gray horizon, he didn't know that the truth she planned to reveal the next day would destroy everything he believed about their past. The night felt endless. Daniel sat on the edge of his bed long after the clock struck midnight, staring at the wall as if answers might etch themselves into the paint if he looked hard enough. Sleep refused to touch him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Lucia's face, tight with pain, trembling with anger, haunted by something deeper he couldn't yet name. And the boy's eyes. God, those eyes. He replayed them over and over, searching for denial and finding none. By dawn, his hands were shaking, his chest tight, his mind spiraling around a truth that terrified him more than anything ever had. By noon, he stood at Riverside Park, though park felt like a generous word for a patch of cracked pavement, dying grass, and an old swing set that creaked like it remembered happier decades. The sky was heavy with winter light, pale and unforgiving. He shoved his hands into his coat pockets, breath misting the air as he scanned for her. She wasn't there yet. Part of him feared she wouldn't come at all. Part of him prayed she wouldn't, because he wasn't sure he could handle what she might say. Then he saw her. Lucia walked down the path with a slow, steady determination, her arms crossed tightly around herself as if shielding her heart from the cold. The children were not with her, something that made Daniel uneasy. She didn't greet him. She didn't even look at him at first. She sat on a peeling bench, spine straight, chin lifted, every inch of her radiating a quiet strength that had been carved from years of survival. When Daniel finally approached, she spoke before he could say a word. "You said you wanted the truth." Her voice was soft but sharp. "So listen, don't interrupt." He nodded, tension coiling inside him like a wound-up spring. Lucia stared at the empty playground, as if the rusted swings could speak for her. 8 years ago, you left without warning. One day you were there, promising you'd protect me, fight for us, fight for our future, and the next day you were gone. Her fingers twisted together, knuckles whitening. No call, no message, nothing. Daniel flinched. He opened his mouth to protest, but she shot him a look that turned his breath to ice. "Let me finish." She inhaled shakily. "I thought you'd changed your mind about me, about us. I told myself you realized it was too messy, too complicated, that a girl like me didn't fit into your world." Her voice cracked. But the truth was worse. I found out I was pregnant a week later. Daniel felt his heart slam against his ribs, but the ground beneath him didn't fully crumble until she added, "And I went to your house to tell you, Daniel. I went." Her throat tightened, emotion closing around every word. "Your mother opened the door. She looked me up and down and told me you were gone, that you wouldn't be coming back, that I should stop chasing impossible things." His stomach dropped. "Lucia, what? No, that's not—" She continued as if she couldn't hear him, or refused to. "She said you'd moved on, transferred schools, changed numbers, that I should stop embarrassing myself." A hollow laugh escaped her, one that sounded like it cost her a piece of her soul. And I believed her, because she looked me in the eyes with that cold smile and made me feel nothing, like trash. Daniel's vision blurred with anger, a different kind this time, sharp and consuming. "Lucia, I never left. I never changed my number. I never—" He took a step back, shocked, remembering a different truth entirely. "My parents, they sent me away." His voice shook with dawning horror. "They didn't approve of us. They told me you broke things off. They said you didn't want me anymore." Lucia's breath caught. For a moment, her mask faltered, revealing raw confusion. Daniel ran a trembling hand through his hair. "My father got me into some business apprenticeship out of state, said it was an opportunity I couldn't waste. I begged them to let me say goodbye to you. They told me you didn't want to see me. They said you were done." His voice cracked under the weight of years stolen. "I spent months hating myself for losing you." Silence swallowed the space between them, heavy, bitter, almost unbearable. Lucia's eyes glistened, tears gathering but refusing to fall. "So, all this time?" He nodded slowly, devastation twisting deep inside him. "We were lied to, both of us." Lucia stood abruptly, needing distance, needing air. The truth had shaken her, but something else was rising behind her eyes. Fear, urgency, a secret still locked behind her trembling lips. When Lucia finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "Daniel, there's more. Something I didn't tell you that day in the store." But before she could continue, her phone buzzed violently in her pocket. She answered, listened for 2 seconds, and her face drained of all color. She dropped the phone. Then she whispered, breathless and terrified, "It's my son. Something's happened." The words "something's happened" detonated inside Daniel's chest like a shockwave. Lucia was already running, fast, panicked, her breath tearing out of her in sharp gasps before his mind fully caught up to what she'd said. He sprinted after her, the cold wind slicing against his face, the uneven pavement blurring beneath his feet. She reached her car, hands trembling so violently she struggled to fit the key into the lock. He rested a hand near hers, not touching her, but grounding her with his presence. "Lucia, tell me, what happened to him?" Her voice broke. "He collapsed at school. They said he was dizzy, fainted. He's never fainted before. He wasn't waking up right away." Her breath shattered into pieces, her panic twisting her words. "The ambulance is taking him to County General. I have to go now." She opened the door, but Daniel stepped forward without hesitation. "I'm coming with you." She didn't argue, she didn't have the strength. She simply nodded once, a sharp, trembling gesture, and he slipped into the passenger seat while she started the engine with shaking hands. The drive was a blur of sirens in the distance, red lights staining the windshield, Lucia's fingers gripping the wheel so tightly her knuckles drained of color. Daniel watched her, the fear on her face carving into him deeper than any blade could carve. "He'll be okay," he murmured, trying to steady her, though he wasn't sure if he was comforting her or himself. She exhaled a shaky breath, her voice barely holding together. "He's strong, he always has been, but he gets tired easily sometimes. He says it's because he grows too fast. But what if it's something worse? What if—" "Don't do that," Daniel said softly. "Don't jump to the worst." She glanced at him for a fleeting moment, and in that fleeting moment, he saw something raw and unguarded, a mother fighting every nightmare her mind could summon. They reached the hospital, tires screeching against pavement as she pulled into the first spot she found. Lucia bolted out of the car, Daniel right behind her as they pushed through the sliding glass doors. The sterile smell of disinfectant burned Daniel's nose, mingling with the low hum of worried voices and distant beeping monitors. Lucia rushed to the reception desk, her words tumbling out too fast. "My son, Mateo Rivera, 6 years old. They brought him here. Where is he? Please." The nurse checked the screen quickly and gestured down the hall. "Room 14. They're evaluating him now. Take a seat in the waiting area." But Lucia didn't sit. She paced, back and forth, hands shaking, breath uneven. Daniel hovered silently at her side, unsure if reaching for her would comfort her or send her further into panic. After a tense minute, she broke the silence. "I should have taken him to the doctor weeks ago. He told me his heart hurt sometimes, but I thought it was stress or growing pains. Dios mío, what if it's something worse? What if—" "Don't do that," Daniel said softly. "Don't jump to the worst." She glanced at him for a fleeting moment, and in that fleeting moment, he saw something raw and unguarded, a mother fighting every nightmare her mind could summon. They reached the hospital, tires screeching against pavement as she pulled into the first spot she found. Lucia bolted out of the car, Daniel right behind her as they pushed through the sliding glass doors. The sterile smell of disinfectant burned Daniel's nose, mingling with the low hum of worried voices and distant beeping monitors. Lucia rushed to the reception desk, her words tumbling out too fast. "My son, Mateo Rivera, 6 years old. They brought him here. Where is he? Please." The nurse checked the screen quickly and gestured down the hall. "Room 14. They're evaluating him now. Take a seat in the waiting area." But Lucia didn't sit. She paced, back and forth, hands shaking, breath uneven. Daniel hovered silently at her side, unsure if reaching for her would comfort her or send her further into panic. After a tense minute, she broke the silence. "I should have taken him to the doctor weeks ago. He told me his heart hurt sometimes, but I thought it was stress or growing pains. Dios mío, what if it's something worse? What if—" "Don't do that," Daniel said softly. "Don't jump to the worst."
She glanced at him for a fleeting moment, and in that fleeting moment, he saw something raw and unguarded, a mother fighting every nightmare her mind could summon. They reached the hospital, tires screeching against pavement as she pulled into the first spot she found. Lucia bolted out of the car, Daniel right behind her as they pushed through the sliding glass doors. The sterile smell of disinfectant burned Daniel's nose, mingling with the low hum of worried voices and distant beeping monitors. Lucia rushed to the reception desk, her words tumbling out too fast. "My son, Mateo Rivera, 6 years old. They brought him here. Where is he? Please." The nurse checked the screen quickly and gestured down the hall.
The words struck Daniel with the force of a moving train. He wasn't supposed to survive his first year. They hung between them in the sterile hospital hallway, thick and suffocating, twisting into the cold fluorescent light until Daniel felt it drain every drop of warmth from his body. Lucia's eyes shimmered, her voice fragile, as though speaking the truth might shatter her from the inside. He stepped closer, his pulse pounding in his ears. "Lucia, what do you mean? What happened to him?" But she pressed a trembling hand against her lips, as if trying to steady herself before the dam inside her burst completely. She nodded toward an empty corner near the vending machines, away from the curious eyes of nurses and restless families pacing the hallway. Daniel followed, his chest tightening with every step. When she finally spoke, her words came out slow, heavy, as if each one carried years of buried pain. "When I found out I was pregnant, I didn't have anyone. I was 17, Daniel, 17, working part-time for cash, sleeping in the tiny room I was renting, trying to pretend I wasn't drowning." Her voice wavered. "The pregnancy was hard, complicated. They said the baby's heart wasn't developing properly, that even if he survived birth, he might not make it beyond a few months." Daniel felt the walls tilt. "My God, Lucia." She shook her head quickly, wiping a tear before it fell. "I told myself I could handle it, that love would be enough. But when he was born, there were machines everywhere, tubes, alarms. I thought every sound meant I was losing him." Her breath hitched, and she pressed a hand to her sternum, as if the memory itself physically hurt. "I stayed in the hospital for months, sleeping in chairs, eating from vending machines because I couldn't leave him. I watched other parents go home with their healthy babies, and I prayed, begged that mine would just live long enough to recognize my voice." Daniel swallowed the burn in his throat. "And he did? He survived." A faint, trembling smile flickered across her lips. "He was so tiny, so fragile, but he fought. Dios mío, he fought so hard. And when he turned 1, the doctors called him a miracle." She paused, her gaze dropping. "But miracles come with shadows. He gets tired easily. He has dizzy spells. His heart works harder than it should. And I've been doing everything I can, but—" Her voice faltered. "I'm running out of money, Daniel." He closed his eyes for a moment, guilt ripping through him like a blade. She'd suffered all of this while he'd lived his life believing she had walked away. "Lucia, you should never have had to do this alone." Her jaw tightened, a mix of pride and pain flashing across her face. "I didn't have a choice, and when the bills piled up, when I had to choose between paying rent or buying his medication, I just kept going. I worked nights cleaning offices with him asleep in a stroller. I took jobs that barely paid enough to breathe." She looked away, voice trembling. "I did things I'm not proud of, just to make sure he stayed alive." A sharp ache bloomed in Daniel's chest. "Lucia, why didn't you try to find me again? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Her eyes snapped to his, raw and exhausted. "Because I thought you didn't want us. Because your mother looked me in the face and told me I meant nothing to you. Because I spent years convincing myself that you were better off without me ruining your life." She sucked in a shaky breath. "And because every time Mateo asked about his father,
I didn't know how to explain why you never came." Silence throbbed between them, heavy and unbearably intimate. Then a nurse appeared in the hallway, calling gently, "Miss Rivera, you can come in now." Lucia wiped her face quickly, nodding, then turned to Daniel with a trembling breath. "I need you to understand something before we go in." She stepped closer, her hand hovering near his chest as if she needed the reassurance of his presence, but feared the consequences of touching him. "Mateo doesn't know who you are. I never told him. I didn't want him growing up believing he wasn't wanted." Daniel nodded slowly, the weight of that truth settling in his bones. "I won't say anything. I promise." She hesitated, then finally whispered, "You can come with me. He asked about you. He felt something, a connection. I don't know how, but he did." That admission cracked something open inside him. They walked toward room 14 together, but just as Lucia reached the door handle, a doctor hurried toward them, her expression urgent, serious, a tone that carved icy fear in the air around them. "Miss Rivera," she said, slightly out of breath, "we found something concerning in Mateo's tests. We need to talk immediately." Lucia's hand slipped from the door, her body swaying. Daniel stepped closer, heart pounding in his ears. The doctor's words made Lucia's knees buckle. "It's his heart. It's worse than we thought." The doctor's words sliced through Lucia like a blade. "It's his heart. It's worse than we thought." She staggered back, her breath catching in her throat as though the air itself had turned to glass. Daniel reached for her instinctively, his hand steady on her arm, anchoring her as the world threatened to collapse beneath her feet. The doctor gestured gently toward a private consultation room, and Lucia followed on trembling legs, Daniel close behind, unwilling to let her face any more darkness alone. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed quietly, far too calm for the storm raging in their chests. The doctor closed the door and opened a chart with movements so deliberate and careful that Lucia's stomach twisted. "Mateo's congenital heart condition has progressed," she said softly. "We're seeing signs of increased strain. His heart is working harder than it should. Much harder." She paused, letting the gravity of her next words settle. "He's going to need surgery, and soon." Lucia's face crumpled, her fingers gripping the edge of the table as if she needed something solid to keep her standing. "Surgery? But he's so small. He's already been through so much." Her voice wavered, breaking under the weight of her fear. Daniel stepped closer, wanting desperately to absorb some of her pain, to carry even a fraction of it. "What kind of surgery? How risky? Tell us everything," he asked, his tone urgent but steady. The doctor nodded, turning the chart toward them. "It's a corrective procedure, high success rate, but the timing is critical. We don't want another collapse. We can stabilize him temporarily, but we can't delay too long." She hesitated. "Insurance, coverage, those details will need to be discussed with billing, but the priority right now is his health." Lucia's breath caught sharply because she already knew what billing meant. More debt, more impossible decisions, more nights praying over unpaid statements. Daniel saw the flicker of dread in her eyes, and something fierce surged inside him. "We will take care of it," he said firmly, "whatever it costs, whatever he needs." Lucia shook her head immediately, fear and pride tangled in her voice. "Daniel, no, you don't even know." But he cut her off, his voice thick with emotion. "He's my son, Lucia. I'm not walking away again. Not now. Not ever." Her jaw tightened, a mix of pride and pain flashing across her face. "I didn't have a choice, and when the bills piled up, when I had to choose between paying rent or buying his medication, I just kept going. I worked nights cleaning offices with him asleep in a stroller. I took jobs that barely paid enough to breathe." She looked away, voice trembling. "I did things I'm not proud of, just to make sure he stayed alive." A sharp ache bloomed in Daniel's chest. "Lucia, why didn't you try to find me again? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Her eyes snapped to his, raw and exhausted. "Because I thought you didn't want us. Because your mother looked me in the face and told me I meant nothing to you. Because I spent years convincing myself that you were better off without me ruining your life." She sucked in a shaky breath. "And because every time Mateo asked about his father, I didn't know how to explain why you never came." Silence throbbed between them, heavy and unbearably intimate. Then a nurse appeared in the hallway, calling gently, "Miss Rivera, you can come in now." Lucia wiped her face quickly, nodding, then turned to Daniel with a trembling breath. "I need you to understand something before we go in." She stepped closer, her hand hovering near his chest as if she needed the reassurance of his presence, but feared the consequences of touching him. "Mateo doesn't know who you are. I never told him. I didn't want him growing up believing he wasn't wanted." Daniel nodded slowly, the weight of that truth settling in his bones. "I won't say anything. I promise." She hesitated, then finally whispered, "You can come with me. He asked about you. He felt something, a connection. I don't know how, but he did." That admission cracked something open inside him. They walked toward room 14 together, but just as Lucia reached the door handle, a doctor hurried toward them, her expression urgent, serious, a tone that carved icy fear in the air around them. "Miss Rivera," she said, slightly out of breath, "we found something concerning in Mateo's tests."